Good morning.
Welcome back to the Tobago Updates morning show, and we are in studio with Sergeant Burt Guy, and we're talking things TTPS, and we want to get into now criminal law and specifically assault and what the law says about assault. So, Sergeant Guy, just tell us, what is the criminal law and how does the law define assault?
Right. So an assault is an act which intentionally or recklessly causes a person to apprehend immediate and unlawful personal violence. Right?
Okay.
This definition would have came about as a result of a case in England in the early 1963, right?
Okay.
Which was Fagan versus the Metropolitan Police. Just to give some context, in order for a crime generally to occur, there must be an actus reus and a mens rea. The actus reus is the guilty act, and the mens rea is the guilty man. In this case with Fagan and the Metropolitan Police, the officer was directing traffic, and he instructed Fagan to pull his car to the side of the road. But whilst doing so, the tires came on the officer's feet,
Right.
which at that time would have been an accident because it was not intentionally done. However, when the officer told him about it, he cursed and told him, "You could wait." So now you had the act, and then by his words, you realize that his intention now, you got the guilty mind. So they came together, and the person, Fagan, was convicted for assaulting the police officer in that circumstance.
Okay, so Sergeant, just give us, is assault only physical? Can it be verbal? And if verbal, what is
But before we do that, Akinlabi, you know what? It was really, I really itching to ask this in layman's terms, because you gave a really nice example there in terms for us to understand exactly what you mean. So in layman's terms, right, if we're talking about assaults, and before when we were off air, you're kind of going through it with us. I want you to give us that kind of explanation in our local space here in terms of, let's say, between my co-host and I, what kind of an example of an assault could take place?
Okay, well, there are under Section 4 of the Summary Offences Act, right? You could assault someone by beating them, or you could assault by threats,
Right.
right? So the beating is the physical act, right? An unlawful physical act upon an individual,
Right.
In relation to threats, you could assault someone by threats once at the time of making the verbalization of what you want to do, and you were in a position to carry out that act, and the person apprehend some fear in relation to you carrying out that act as well.
So that can be considered
Assault by
threats.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is like when somebody in their community, they have a squabble, and somebody has a machete and they say, "I will chop you up," you know,
Right.
something like that. Could be considered assault by threats.
Yes.
Okay.
So, but just to draw
to
some
make it clear.
context, if the person is like 100 feet away from you,
Right.
where you will not be able to reach them at the time, it will not be considered at that moment an assault.
What if the person is 100 feet away? They're threatening, but they're making movements towards you. I mean, you could get out of the way, but they're still
Advancing to you.
if they're advancing towards you, whether they're running towards you with the cutlass or something like that, they could still carry out the threat.
Well, right. So that is the thing. So that is why it says once as the person is in a position to carry out the act that they are verbalizing, and the victim apprehends fear. So, like as you say, the person's run, or as the case may be.
But
right?
then what is the threshold for distance then? What is the threshold for distance?
No, but we have to
case
be
like that?
real. If somebody is 100 feet away from you, could they strike you at that time? But you say they're advancing, right? So that causes a difference in the situation or the circumstances now.
So if they stay stationary while they're doing it, while they make the threat, it's just a threat. It's not necessarily it's not assault by threats.
No.
Okay, gotcha.
But threatening violence itself, even though you're not able to carry out the threat at the time, is there some sort of charge for that?
Not to my, I could be wrong, but not to my
or any approach
Because-
for follow-up or investigation, because I understand where
Yes.
Akinlabi is coming from.
Well, in these circumstances as well, an investigation will be done, and at the end, a determination will be made whether the person committed an offense or not. Because in some circumstances, offenses may not have been committed, and we will just warn the individuals to keep the peace and desist from such conduct.
Yes. Okay, well, concerning the assaults, you stated the different types of assault that persons could carry out, whether it's by threat or actually physical assaults. What does the law say in terms of punishment for carrying out those crimes?
Well, the punishment for assault, well, these matters can only be tried at the summary court, that is before a magistrate. And the maximum punishment is 3 months imprisonment. Right? It is a very...
Okay.
It's classified as a minor offenses. There are classification of minor offenses, minor crimes, serious crimes. This, as we speak here, is a minor offense.
Also, in this case, assault is when they frame it as assault, it's considered a minor offense. Minor assaults. It's not like if I have that same machete and I come to you and I chop you with it, that's a major offense. Or is that
Right.
still
So
considered
yes,
minor?
and so assaults could escalate and lead to other types of offenses. We have like assault occasioning a wound, assault occasioning actual bodily harm, which is also a summary offense. And we could also go to malicious wounding, which now is what we call a either way or hybrid offense, which could be tried before a magistrate or a judge, right?
Okay.
And then it could escalate as well higher to wounding with intent, right? Which is real serious harm, where in situations, if the person does not receive medical attention, they may die as a result of the assault. So that would be assault which could have caused a serious wound or someone to lose a limb, as the case may be.
You know, in terms of, I want to go back a little bit, you mentioned in terms of assault with by threat. If nothing happens, you might call, you do the investigation, you come in, you warn the person, and you tell them, you know, or kind of behave yourself now, you know, in our local parlance, you know,
basically.
relax yourself. What if a situation like this persists?
Yeah.
So you came in, you had the conversation, you spoke to the two parties, or you behave yourself, go your separate ways. Next week, same thing. The week after, same thing. What then happens in a case like that, where it's a continuous type of assault by threat?
Well, the police service, we can only operate within the laws. So as I said, the only thing we can do is conduct an investigation, and if someone is found to be liable, they will be charged. If not, we would still make an intervention and try to speak to the individuals to have them keep the peace.
We see, so this has actually given us more context and given us a greater understanding, because we see very often in Trinidad and Tobago cases where somebody may have been murdered. Let's say in a domestic issue, somebody may have been murdered, and the family members complain that, you know, we complain that they keep threatening us, and they claim that the police didn't do anything, but perhaps the law has constrained the police in being able to act on it, because at the time the person probably carried out the threats, they did not meet the threshold for it to become assault.
Yes, that is so correct. That is so correct.
And equally frustrating, because, I mean, we're talking here now about this thing escalated, and you spoke about the different degrees,
Yes.
but this didn't have the opportunity to get to those degrees.
Yeah,
it went
those
from
degrees.
cold to hot you know,
instant.
because the complaints kept coming in, but because you were restricted in terms of carrying out the law, you can't really do anything until something happens,
Yeah.
you know, and it's very, very frustrating.
I wouldn't use the term that we are restricted, you know, but in every society, there are laws, and we have to, all citizens, once as you are within that society, you have to operate by those laws. You can't go outside. You can't shift the goalposts.
Yeah, yes. Go ahead.
So, you know, it really is interesting, and I'm happy for the definitions of the action, so that people can kind of understand what can happen if something happens. For instance, if you are the vulnerable person, you are the person being threatened, or you are the person being assaulted, the steps that they can take. What are these steps that this person can now take to ensure that they one, log a report, they reach the TTPS or whatever it is, and in terms of safeguarding themselves in the event that there might be a reoccurrence of the situation?
Okay, so we would advise, the police service would advise persons not to take actions into their own hands. If you have a dispute, you should come to the police and make a report. You don't even have to come to the station. You could just call and the officers would appear. That is our standard operating procedures. You don't have to come to the station. And officers would appear and then they would interview persons. Well, they would conduct an investigation, interview persons, and as I said, if anyone is found to have committed any criminal offense, we charge. There are instances for, say, like if the persons reside in the same household and they have this dispute, there is the avenue where you can go to the court and obtain an order restricting them from threatening you or using violent language towards you. And if you breach that order, you could make a report to the police and the police could arrest the person based on that order.
In your experience, how effective have those court orders been in those kind of situations? In terms of restricting the person from actually...
Well, I have seen situations where persons have actually moved out of the residence because of these kinds of actions. So I would say they are very effective.
Okay.
Very, very interesting. I mean, a very, very interesting order because, I mean...
Well, it basically is a protection order.
Yes.
So, you know, for family members.
Right.
It is not open to all classes of individuals.
Okay.
So it is specifically
specifically
for indwelling, right?
Okay.
Got it. Okay. I mean, this topic is so very interesting. You know, I never really thought about these types of actions in this way. I just know what is a crime, what is right, and what is wrong. But, you know, I'm really happy for the breakdown here. And I want you to continue. I want you to continue with the breakdown and the explanation so that we kind of at a good place so we understand exactly what our rights are and the approaches we can take to ensure that we receive.
Yeah.
Let me just talk about another type of an assault, which is an aggravated assault. This is under Section 5.1 of the Summary Offences Act. Now, the police will not charge you for this offense. They will charge you for an assault, the basic assault, which we spoke about earlier, and the magistrate now is the one to deem this assault aggravated. And the reason why is because this assault was inflicted upon a female, a child, someone who is under the age of 18, so an old or sick person. So basically someone who is incapable of defending themselves. And the reason for raising it to an aggravated assault is because, as I told you before, the sentence for someone found guilty is 3 months. But if the court deems the assault aggravated, the sentence is now 6 months, the maximum sentence.
You would not believe, I thought aggravated assault was something completely different. I thought aggravated assault was when someone eggs you on and you react violently. That's what I thought aggravated assault was. So just getting this information it makes me understand the law a lot more, you know, understanding the nuances of the law and that kind of thing. So in terms of these aggravated assaults, does it extend towards persons with disabilities?
Yes, that's why it says infirm.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And you know, I really wish we had more time to go through. These are the kind of conversations that we really want to have more time to go through so that we can have an understanding of what is happening. I mean, we can understand the terms as Akinlabi just said. He really now understands what aggravation is in terms of the law, in the context of the law. So I hope we could have a part 2 of this conversation, but because of time, we have to bring the curtain down on this conversation this morning. But before we end, is there any additional information you want to share before we go?
Well, I would just like to encourage members of the public, when confronted in situations, in disputes, to exercise some restraint, some emotional intelligence. Right? You know, you could identify what are your triggers, and once as you realize someone is getting to you to cause you to act out in a manner that may be unlawful. You find some way to de-escalate, walk away.
Okay.
You know, some words of advice there, and of course the information in terms of the awareness of what the terms are where these activities are concerned, and what you can do to ensure that you are in a safe space. Of course, you know, viewers, we want to know your comments, your views on this. Of course, remember, you can leave your comments on our Facebook live stream and on our YouTube channel. Tell us what you want to hear us talking about on this topic. Of course, we want to have a part 2, and if we do, we want to know what you want to know as well. We've been speaking with Sergeant Burt Guy of the TTPS this morning, as he brought to us the TTPS crime updates in terms of criminal activity happening here on the island of Tobago, as well as criminal law, specifically assault. We have to go for a short break before we continue conversations here in studio this morning, and as we go, we invite you to help us.
Share the live, share the live, share the live.
We'll be right back.